Welcome to Decoding the Creative, a show about the joys and burdens of the artistic journey. In this episode, we are joined by David Stanley to discuss the unique challenges and emotions surrounding a long-term project. What does it take to go the distance, and how do you feel when the project is over and you have to move on? Completing a long-term project can be an emotional roller coaster, and we try to unpack that entire phenomenon in this episode. So without further ado, this is episode 6, The Long Haul. All right, everyone. Today we have graphic designer, artist, video game creator, and a very dear friend of ours, David Stanley. David Stanley is the creator of the fantastic video game Skeletak, which is available on all console platforms and PC. And he is also a breathtaking visual artist on many different mediums. David, I would love to give you the floor, though, and give the people a more proper rundown of your creative background, where you're from, what you're working on, and what you are planning on working on in the future real quick.
Sure thing. I appreciate you guys having me today.
No problem.
Yeah, it's, oh man, where to start? I'm from North Carolina, and I got my start in the game dev industry and art in general back in 2012 when I started freelancing. I was the artist, level designer, icon designer, animator for a number of small mobile titles that came out, and they were just really simple, casual games. Across the years, we got featured on the front of the App Store 17 times. Somewhere in there, mobile gaming wasn't really enough for me creatively. I was starting to question, if I could ever get involved in PC games or console games. So quietly in the background, I started teaching myself how to program, and I started working on just a small passion project, a tiny, simple platformer called Skeletak. I wasn't actually planning to really do anything with it. It was just for learning purposes. And the more I worked on it, the more I fell in love with the project, and I started posting about it on social media, and it kind of took off. And I worked on the game for 2 years by myself. I started that project in 2015. After those 2 years, I started to get attention from, like other people who wanted to help me with the game, publishing opportunities. Long story short, Konami ended up taking an interest, and they had seen us in the press somewhere, and Konami ended up signing us on to publish Skeletak in 2020. Skeletak was the flagship title of their Western indie publishing branch. Until then they had just been doing like Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, like all that stuff. So it was really surreal and breathtaking to be a part of that company, of that company's library. And now that Skeletak was launched last year, now I'm back to freelancing as I kind of set my sights on where I'm going to go next. I've got some stuff in the works, but it's not something I can talk about yet, unfortunately.
Gotta keep that hush, top secret.
Yeah, you know.
That's always the juiciest stuff when somebody says, "Well, I'd like to talk about it, but
yeah, and it always
I can't.
It always sounds so high and mighty, and I really don't want to sound like that. I'm under contract not to say.
Well, yeah,
we get it.
Yeah, it's literally the truth, and I appreciate that. I just always find it, exciting.
It is.
Yeah. So maybe
awesome.
later this year, if stuff works out, I can talk about it. But
yeah.
There we go.
Really, it's like after we launched Skeletak, I could step back and truly see how much I still needed to learn. And I know you guys understand, like as an artist or as a musician or any creative person, you really never stop learning.
Oh, that's true.
Yep.
That's true.
So it was just kind of a chance to recollect myself and be like, I really hate drawing trees. Let me learn how to do that better, or
awesome.
let me learn how to do like concept art better for environments and characters, stuff like that.
There you go. That's awesome, man. Well, today we're going to dive into a topic that I think a lot of creative people can relate to, and that's what I've been calling the long haul project. A piece of work that you really put your time and effort into that might last multiple years, or in some people, in their case, it might even last decades. Some of us have finished those works of art. Some of us, myself included, have not. But what's really neat about our guest, David, over the 10 plus years of knowing you, you were even my first roommate growing up, mind you, fun fact. I've gotten the privilege of seeing you create your works of art through so many different visual platforms. And I've always been jealous of that, to be honest with you, because
Oh
I am
God.
not a visual artist. I don't have that gift. I can't paint. I can't draw. And even something like creating a video game, like that just makes my head hurt, thinking about what goes into making that.
Hey, same here.
Yeah, yeah. So what David, what he's always been to me personally, he's been a great example of grinding it out to make his dream work. Because when you meet David, when you talk to him, when you interact with him, especially when you start talking about, video games and creativity and all of those different mediums, you can tell that he's a creator. That's what he was put on this earth to do. That's his focus. And I've always just admired that. I've always loved talking to him, spending time with him. So, David, I pose the question to you. With this determination that I've always seen in you, what inspirations and motivations growing up and throughout your formative years did you personally get that gave you this, sense of determination and wanting to create as your main career or your main focus? Because again, a lot of us hang it up and put it on the back burner and, focus on other areas of life. But in your case, you went on a journey of making a video game. And I know you talked about that was kind of just like a little personal project at first, but, what kind of went into you wanting to go down this long haul project?
Wow, great question. When I was very young, like around kindergarten age, so like 5, my parents were introducing me to the classic Disney films, Beauty and the Beast. A few years after that, Aladdin. Everything that I was seeing was so gorgeous. And of course, at the time, I had like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on
Nice.
television. Darkwing Duck. Later on, I really fell in love with Rocko's Modern Life and Ren and Stimpy. And I was being like introduced to all this amazing media in TV and film. And, when I was 5, I also got my first Nintendo. And I was just like getting a little bit older. And I was like, okay, dude, this, like, people are actually making money with this as a job. And there's no way I could do it, but I kind of want to. And my parents were super supportive of that. Like, when I had an interest in music when I was 14 or 15, they were like, all right, let's get him his first cheap guitar. And even before that, when I was showing an interest in art, they were like, let's buy him art sets and paper for every single holiday ever. And so I was just like loaded down with the tools, like simple tools to do whatever. And so that's what I did. And I spent many years not really understanding what my style should be, just kind of emulating others that I had seen, copying comic book covers and drawing Garfield and Mortal Kombat characters. And for a long time, honestly, I went well into my 20s not really knowing what I wanted to do. Like, even when I was living with you, Ben, and you would see the stuff that I was making and the things I was interested in. It was cool stuff for the time, but none of it was really like taking off in any meaningful way. But that wasn't really the point. I think the life of a creative is always going to be this sort of meandering path where it's okay to have a massive question mark in front of you. You don't have to know what that is. You can have a general idea, like, I want to play a show for 100 people, or I want to publish a book. I don't care who reads it. I just want to publish it. Or I want to, make a little game. It's okay to like set these goals, but I think there are so many variables that we don't understand and can't plan for that it's really hard to be like, I'm going to make a Konami game. Who would say that? Who would say that? Even in 2018, like, if you told me that was a possibility, I would have laughed at you. So it's really like working retail, working at cafes and fast food places, as I was growing up, it was fine money. I mean, like, I met some cool people. I learned how to be more of a people person. I learned how to, improve my public speaking. I met some great friends in you and Ray.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't without its benefits. But at the same time, there's always like a part of me that's like, I not that I'm like better than it, but it wasn't fulfilling. So, I kind of took a leap. Like, let's freelance and let's severely struggle to pay the bills for a couple of years. But weirdly, I enjoyed that so much more than working at a job that I would have hated, but I would have had steady money. So it's just kind of a trade. And I think with any creative thing, you decide when you are successful at it, not everyone else. Which I don't know.
That's good. That's good.
Maybe it sounds kind of cliche, but it's like if you put out a game on Steam and 5 of your friends buy that, that's huge.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
Yeah.
you're right. Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like when you start a new project, or when you start a long project rather, you have to have an extra dose of kind of conviction, like I believe in this enough that I'm going to give it a year or a couple of
Yep.
years, which is different than if you're working on something that takes 5 minutes. So you have to have like conviction and true belief in whatever it is you're making. And you have to be pretty comfortable with the risk and the uncertainty, like you're talking about, where you have this question mark before you in your path. Artists have to have a certain level of, they're just okay with the uncertainty and the risk.
yeah, it's just a personality trait for creatives. And oh gosh, what was I going to say? Like I mentioned previously, like I'd spent most of my 20s making things, but it was like things I could make in a day or a couple of days, like
Yeah.
paintings and little ideas. And I had ideas for bigger projects at that time, but I abandoned them like I had done my entire life. I'd work for a few weeks on something and I would have a bigger, shinier idea. And I'm like, ooh, let me work on that instead.
Yeah.
So finally, like, I was 30 when I started teaching myself to program to work on Skeletak. I was like, dude, I can't keep making little things that nobody remembers, nobody really interacts with it. Stuff that I'm personally not super happy about. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm creating any sort of interesting legacy for my work, on this planet.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I need something substantial that is not substantial as in like people all over the world are gonna like love me for it, but just something that makes me feel in my soul like, this is my masterpiece. And Skeletak ended up being it. And I was glad that I had failed at so many other tasks leading up to it, because by the time I got to Skeletak, and had that in my mind, I was like, I could devote years to this. Like, I'm ready for this now.
You had that conviction. And see, I think that my biggest fear when it comes to starting a long-term project, like a writing project, is you were talking about, well, what if five of your friends play your game? It's the same way. The biggest fear is, will people care? If I go through this year or year and a half long process, will I come out the other side and will anyone care and engage in the material? That's really the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. Like,
That is a big thing.
like, I know pretty much every piece of media that ever comes out will be able to find an audience if you try. Like, it might be a small audience. And I don't know if this is the deal with writers, Ray, but it's certainly the deal in game dev. Like, the market is so saturated with people creating games every day, so it is really hard to stand out. I don't know how I would have felt if I had spent 5 years or whatever on Skeletak and then nobody cared about it. It's like weird. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, man.
It's like a weird dichotomy in my mind where, like, I'm always going to make something that I'm proud of first. but at the same time, I would really enjoy it if the world liked my work too.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I think me and Ray have discussed this about, creating in general, there's several different aspects, I think, to the human condition that, especially with creatives, fuels us to want to create, whether it's long haul projects like we're talking today, or even just the short, took me a day to make it. We've talked about different elements to it, but in the case of a long haul project, what would you two suggest is a big factor in people wanting to pursue that? Would it, in your personal case, would it have been obsession? Would it have been passion? Would say that you're just there was a slight addiction to the creative process, or, a little mixture of all that?
It's interesting you bring up addiction, because I really think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Especially like when you're working on something that is as mysterious and strange as programming. Like, well, it was mysterious and strange for me because I was not a programmer. I was only picking it up to work on this project. So, every day when I would write a piece of code that I had imagined while I was in the shower and I actually see it working when I launched the game, it is super addicting. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, wow, I made him jump. I made him, hit an enemy with his sword, and then the enemy died because of code that I wrote. Let me see what else I can do with this code. Like, and it would give me more, every little success like that would give me more ideas, like for more programming things I could do, as well as art that I could create to support the programming. So it was just like a ton of little steps. And then finally I'm a year in, and a small group on Twitter are like following the game, and it's like people I've never met in my life, and they're interested in playing my demo when it comes out. And I'm like, geez, I've got to keep going. This is crazy. I can't believe. Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, it's mostly like an addiction, I think, mixed with passion. And also, what the alternative is if you fail. It's like, if I can't do this, I will either have to keep struggling with my freelancing, keep taking these random odd jobs, never knowing if it's going to pan out in the long run, money wise, or bite the bullet and go back to clock in jobs. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing clock in jobs.
No.
But like, you always know that there's something to fall back to. But I remember growing up, and like my dad worked construction like his entire adult life, and his body was just like battered and bruised because of that. He was super good at his work, but he always told me, like, you don't have to go to college, but like find something that you enjoy and try to pursue it, because look at me, like, you see how much I hurt every day, how much I just like, it hurts me to get out of bed in the morning. Like, you don't want to do this. And I was like, you're right. I don't.
Yeah, I have to say, I think fulfillment in your job is like the highest echelon of achievement, because it's like, look, you can find something steady, you can find something with a decent wage, but the most elusive prize is it fulfilling?
That's true, Ray.
Everybody misses that one. So I think that's really something to aspire for, because it's not easy to find.
Right. I remember reading something about intrinsic value versus extrinsic value.
Yeah.
And, you can either, look at the extrinsic value, which is like, how much money can I get for this, versus does it fulfill me inside? And, sometimes you have to adjust your own compass a little bit and be like, okay, I've got to pay some bills here soon. So maybe I'll do some freelance work that I'm not super proud of, but it gets the job done.
Yeah, I get that. Well, and to go back, Ben, to go back to your question of like what compels you, I think there's an interesting psychological aspect to any art. So like, imagine you take let's do a thought experiment here. Imagine you take 100 people and you sit them in a room and you say, listen to this podcast episode. Out of the 100, I think you're going to have like 20 people who have a thought that goes, oh, I could do that. And then you're going to have maybe 5 to 10 people that say, I will do that. And then they start trying to, right? And I think the same thing is true in reading. When I read a science fiction book, the number one feeling I have is I could write one of these and I'm going to try. Like it's a psychological mechanism, whereas there are a lot of people who just read it and enjoy it. And then they move on, right? So I think we have the spirit of emulation that when we see something we think we can do, we just try to, right?
Yeah. A couple of years back, I was listening to a self-help audiobook, and he said something that stuck with me like so powerfully. He was saying like, not even creatively, but just in your own life, if you wanted to lose weight or get back to the gym, you'll have people that say, I want to lose weight, or I need to get in shape. I want to do that. And he said it's dangerous language because wanting something has already been achieved. Like, I want to do that. Like, well, there you go. You want it right now. So
congratulations.
You're successful. The way to think about it is like, I am going to do that. I'm going to do that today. And then just start taking those steps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier said than done. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in front of a computer every day, and I feel my body wasting away, and it's hard to like, it's hard to always take those steps, but there's like at least one area in my life where I'm always willing to be like super proactive, and that's with my creative work.
Yeah.
That's awesome. When I've got a really neat position in this conversation because both David, you and Ray have both done these long haul projects where most of my work has always been, musician related, which, with musicians, you both are both musicians, and most songs, they don't take years to create. Some do, but most you do them, within a day, weeks. Some people are awesome and do it in like an hour. But so I get to ask this question and kind of pose it to you and pick your brains with this. When you finish that masterpiece, whether Ray, it's writing a book, David, it's, doing a video game or a huge visual art project, but, recently it's the video game. Those take years and years of time and development and testing and just proofreading and looking over and, forming the story and everything. So what happens after all that's said and done? You've done all that work, you've exhausted all that time, and you've poured your soul into it. What happens when it ends? How's that played out for you? I imagine you're exhilarated, but you're also exhausted. But are you also eager to do more? Did you feel like you were out of ideas? How did you carry on, and where did you go from there?
Nice. Ray, I'll give you the chance to go first if you like.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is emotionally, when you finish a major project, it's very similar to like reading a book and being finished with it. There is this kind of bittersweet absence. Like, I can't believe that's over, right? And that's something that I have felt is like, this is done. It's done. Now, I think you also start to wonder, will it take on a second life? Because if you're creating art that you put out there, maybe people will play it. Maybe people will read it. Maybe people won't. Maybe there'll be a discussion or a community that blooms from this. And so you wonder whether it will get its next phase of development, which is a public-facing thing. For me, I usually feel kind of emptied out in a certain respect, and then I feel like I have to take a little time to recharge before my next thing. But it's, I don't ever have the fear of like, oh, I bet I'm out of ideas for life. This is it for me. I do think some people feel that way. A lot of writers feel like once they get done with a project, they think they have a fear that they'll never get anything done again, right?
Yeah. On my end, like it. In a lot of ways, it echoes what Ray said. It's a really bittersweet thing. You put years of your life into this project. It is you essentially, and I ended up like, especially with Skeletak, I know the comparison doesn't really stand up because Ray, you have kids, and that's a bigger thing. But I really started to think of the game as like my child, my child was, about 5 years old, and I sent him out into the world, and I really hoped that people were good to him and that he did good things, even without my influence. So, once that day came and the game launched, it was just like this insane feeling of elation. Not only because we finished this massive project that I never really thought would make it to this point, but one of my favorite like publishers of all time was
big,
at the helm. So it was just like a big deal for me. But at the same time, I'm like still I wake up every day and I think about Skull Attack. I don't even think about like what I would do if I was still working on it, because it's done. Like I said everything I wanted to say with it, and the team did everything they wanted to do. But it's such a part of my thought process for years. Like I still can't stop thinking about it. But a lot of people would ask, like, "Hey, Dave, we're gonna see Skull Attack 2?" And I'm just like, honestly, I doubt it. Like I'm not really a sequel kind of guy. Which
you heard it here first, people.
Also, like we one of the bigger things for me on that project was, I mean, it's public knowledge, but a lot of people don't know about it. I think Konami actually purchased that IP from us. Like they liked the idea enough that they were like, we want that forever.
That's wild.
And I'm like, dude, okay.
That's crazy.
Like part of what made that decision such a no-brainer for me was I don't really care about sequels. And like Ray said, at the end of all that, I could never do a cartoon skeleton game for the rest of my life, and I would be fine. Like I have a lot of other seeds of ideas that are just a few sentences in a text document somewhere, and it might not even be a video game. It might be a comic book or something. But there's I think probably you would feel the same way, like with your music, Ben. I mean, you are one of the best drummers I've ever seen, and like,
oh, you stop.
When I, hey man, you got to gush over me for a while back there.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Sure thing, dude. Like when I first met you, well, I saw you and Ray playing music before I actually met you, and I was just like, dude, I want that. That's so freaking cool. And so I'm sure it's the same with you. Like when you sit down at your drum kit, you're not like, dude, I have no more original beats left in me. I'm just gonna have to play the same old 4/4 beat for the rest of my life. Like no, you know that like you don't know where it's gonna come from right now, but you know that there's always some new stuff like bubbling up to the surface for you musically.
Indeed. And I think that's what fuel, that's a universal fuel to creating that we all can, we can all agree on. We all have different fuels to our creativity, but that main one is, we love exploring what's next, and we love finding out what's the next thing. And, like you said, you're not a sequel guy. Some creative people love going into that realm of sequels and then a third and a fourth, and they love expanding the story. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like you. I kind of love it when a story is so good that you want a sequel, but you also appreciate that there's only one.
Yeah.
And you want to go on and do something different. That's the fuel. So the fuel, with music with me is I always love creating. And even though I've played one idea and I may feel like at times that I've exhausted everything, me personally, I do hit those walls where I do feel like, oh man, I might have to play this 4/4 beat, but it doesn't last very long because I'm always urging myself and have that itch to figure something new out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is neat.
And what's interesting too, how the what part of the emotional aspect of all this is the turnaround time difference. Like, I mean, you got to think, I could theoretically write a song, record it, and then have it on Spotify in like a week's time. Same thing with podcasts. You can record a podcast today, edit it, whatever, have it online tomorrow. There is a really big difference in the turnaround time for like if you're making a video game or you're like writing a book. It's a longer term investment, as opposed to like, putting in 4 or 5 minutes for a song. So I think that's a big part of whether like you feel an instantaneous gratification or if you're like, I hope people love this game when I'm done a year from now. That's a really big difference.
Yeah. It's a strange thing to think about. Like, And especially in indie game development, like I have seen people say, and now I say it myself, if you're going to start working on an indie game, if you think it's only going to take, 3 months to do, chances are like it'll take a lot longer than that. And you
Yeah.
really should understand, like, you need to be in love with your idea. Don't just make something because that's the hot thing to be making right now. Because, if you spend a year on this thing, when it finally comes out, that might not be the fad anymore, and
Right.
nobody will care about it.
Yeah.
That's the chance. So it's like, I always wanted something that, even if it didn't have any sort of success, I could play it or enjoy that media no matter what year it was, and
Yeah.
and never feel like it was tied to the year in which it was created.
That's big. That's a good thing too, because I know not a lot. That's like something you don't think about really when you're creating. Like especially in the long haul project. What if what I'm doing right now that it's big right now, it could catch on. What if it's not in the 2, 3, 4 years that it takes me to finish it?
Yeah,
And
like,
what
'cause
if no
now-
one, what if that's not the fad anymore? So that's a crazy
Right.
concept to think about when you go into a long-term project.
Yeah, and I think that's the danger of like chasing marketability because people will do that. They'll go, okay, I'm just going to make whatever's hot now. I'm always chasing the bandwagon on foot. And the problem is you
Right.
never actually catch up with it because it's always a couple years ahead of you, and you're always reacting. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's the danger.
Exactly. Like that's so well put, Ray. Like if you're always reacting, you're never going to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
You have to make something that you just timelessly believe in because chasing the trend is basically you have to hope that you get lucky enough that your idea and the timing align. And that is nothing, right?
And, in that desperation, it can lead you to release a project before it's ready so that you're still on top of that wave. And that's just it's just a weird place to be, I think. So I'd rather not. On the flip side, the truth is I made a simple animated cartoony game in a year when, almost everything is just going like crazy 3D and nice realistic graphics.
Yeah.
And, so on the flip side of things, there is that like, Skeletak came out maybe looking and feeling a bit dated, but it's kind of by design. Like it's something that I really believed in. It's kind of a love letter to the crazy difficult platformers that I grew up with, and I mean it worked out, but it's certainly had its detractors along the way. But it's if it wasn't for them, that's cool. Play some other game.
Well, it's
Yeah,
like
that's
you
true.
were talking about there always being a market for something. I mean, I think the video game world, there's always a niche market for really pixelated stuff or really
yeah.
like photorealistic. Like there's always, you just literally have to find the corner for that. And
Yeah.
that's really true for a lot of arts is really about finding your market.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, because retro will be in, pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
You can find that niche market that wants, like you said, David, something that reminds them of the game platforms that they played when they were growing up. Same
Yeah.
thing in a musician world. You get a lot of times where musicians love adding elements of what they listened to when they grew up. Photography, I've seen, photographers, they added classic kind of retro elements to, their photography. I think
Yeah.
that's just kind of something that's always going to be, if you look at the marketability aspect of it, that's always kind of something that you'll always have a niche market for in any platform.
So, David, you said that Konami bought the IP, the intellectual property rights for Scully, the character in Skeletak. So, are we crossing our fingers that Scully gets put into Smash Brothers one day?
That would be
man.
awesome.
I remember.
Oh, man.
God, it's so funny you bring it up because, like, internally inside our team across the years, we when we first knew that Konami was interested and also that we were definitely putting the game out on the Switch, we were like,
Yep.
"Yo,
This is
Scully and Ember and Smash." God, it was
That would be wild.
yeah.
That's the
'cause-
highest achievement conceivable.
Dude, it really is. And I mean, I don't I would always keep my fingers crossed for it, but I doubt it will happen. But you know, the possibility was there at the time because we would see like a character from Undertale, I think,
Yeah.
made it into Smash, and
It's a random collection, and it keeps growing more random with every
yeah,
addition.
like
You know.
you never know what fighters or you know what content they're gonna add next. So that was always really cool to see. Yeah, another one that like people would have their fingers crossed for was like a physical release of the game,
Yeah.
which I would freak out.
Yes.
But
Just to
yeah,
have it in
it's
your hands, right?
dude, exactly. So it's like a weird feeling for me as the creator now because Konami has entire ownership of that, and I'm totally cool with it. But
Yeah.
sometimes they do things that surprise me and things that they didn't have to include me in the planning. Like you know, they had like some sticker packs going around. They had like some shirts and some other cool things from the game, and I'm just like, oh, neat! I had no idea.
Yeah, that's
That's so
awesome.
cool.
That
That's
that's
Whereas
so
like you
cool.
know, it felt like you know, it always felt like I would be at the forefront of decisions like that, and now the reality is I'm not. And like if they don't want to, they don't ever have to include me in anything. Like it's their thing now.
yeah.
So it's just interesting to see how that's all like come to pass.
It's just weird to see your baby, your kind of creative infant there, just become a part of the world detached from you. You know, it's
Yeah,
like with music. You know, there are people that know your music, they don't know you. And, you know, right?
right.
And it's in the world. It's not just in your brain anymore.
Yeah, it's such a strange and unique feeling. And, you know, when I take the time to think about what is my purpose, like, dude, I have found it. I've created the thing that I believe is my purpose, which is creating things to put out in the world for other people to enjoy
Yeah.
if they choose. An interesting thing I would always think about is like, Ray, you started talking about it earlier, and it reminded me. You started saying, you know, if you put 100 people in a room, and it reminded me of something else I used to think about. I was like, if you put 100 people in a room and told them to make like, and you gave them a few paragraphs and you described the premise of Skull Attack, and you said, all right, here's your team, here's your premise, make the game. Like if you had 1 million people,
Yeah.
you would get 1 million different versions of that product.
Yep.
So whenever I make something, I'm like, wow, I am the only one on the planet who has done this exact thing.
Yeah. Because you did it your way. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not it's not us trying to all find raw, unique ideas from the scratch that no one's ever thought of. It's really about finding your particular recipe for a given idea, right?
Exactly, dude. It's really important that you bring that up because when you take apart the different elements of a game like Skull Attack, there's nothing in it that is truly novel. And saying that doesn't minimize the game
Right.
or how important it was to me, but there are unique spins on ideas, and you know, it's kind of a growing of ideas that we've all seen in the past, you know, things that we were familiar with, things that we saw in the media. And I don't know, it comes together in a unique recipe that's never been done in exactly that way,
Right.
even if the pieces that make it up are nothing groundbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think writers fall into that trap, or especially genre writers like science fiction writers, because they want to come up with a literally novel concept. They want to come up
Yeah.
with an idea no one's ever thought of, but then they go discover their idea in another person's book, and they become kind of crestfallen. And the point is not for you to come up with literally unique ideas that no one's ever done. The point is to do it your way, right? Do it
Right.
with your particular brand and your particular approach, and that is where you find some quality and some novelty, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
I
you're
think it's
deep
always
in
a
science fiction.
Yeah, so I mean, I like science fiction and horror are my particular genres, and so that's kind of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I feel the same. Like I've never written anything like that.
Yeah.
Like I've wanted to in the past, but my my work ethic for actually creating narratives, it was like terrible. And yeah, exactly what you were saying. I would try to think of something I've never seen before, some crazy psychological horror that I've never even heard of that
Yeah.
would just, and I never get past the brainstorming process
Yeah.
because it's so hard to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna see it as like categories. So if you're reading science fiction short stories, look, it's either gonna be about aliens, some kind of disease or virus, computer stuff, an asteroid, VR, AI. It's gonna be there's a finite list of probably 15 things, and the science fiction story is gonna be about one of those 15. So you're never gonna invent a 16th new thing. That's like under aliens, UFOs, AI. No, you're not going to come up with a new one per se. You're going to work with a unique approach in a genre that already exists.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, if you were as a writer, if you were to invent some 16th thing, as you say, that's never been conceived of before, a good portion of your book is going to be explaining to the reader why the stakes are so high and how this
Yeah.
stuff works.
Yeah.
So a lot of the heavy lifting in like writing is done by the reader's prior knowledge of that
absolutely.
thing and why that thing is so important and why that thing would be so terrible if it broke down or was destroyed, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
you have to, I think, accept yourself as an artist that works within certain preconceptions in a certain culture. You're not just going to invent out of thin air. You invent based on your circumstances and your inspirations and all that.
That's
Very
definitely
true.
true.
That's very true. You're. I think you always hear the artists and the creatives say, "Oh, we wanted to create something that's never been done before." I can't tell you how many like interviews I've read where it's like, "Yeah, we wanted to create something that you've never heard before," and then you listen to it and you're like, "Well, I've kind of heard it before." But I think it's something hard to embrace because we want to always push for, like you said, maybe making that 16th thing. That would be super cool if you kind of made something that literally no one has heard at this point before or seen
Yeah.
before. But I think there's a beauty in embracing the fact that you're not per se creating something that someone has never seen before, but you're creating a combination of different elements in a genre that already exists, but you're expanding upon it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
that's what you end up seeing. It's a combination of your influences, what you see around you, and if you embrace that fact instead of, beating your head against the wall sometimes, which I know I've done and my
Yeah.
bandmates have done, trying to figure out how you can sound or look like something that's never happened before, embrace the fact that the product you're going to come out with is going to be a combination of these different elements, and how you put them together and piece them together. That's what's going to be cool and unique about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
exactly.
I think the ultimate example of this is love songs. Like
Yes.
people have been writing love songs for tens of thousands of years probably, and
Yeah.
yet we're still coming up with new angles on it. So that's why, like for example, I wrote a short story about a virtual reality thing. Now, obviously, everybody knows about the other popular virtual reality novels like Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So I'm like, well, it doesn't mean that like he wrote that book and now VR is over. We're just done with it, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not how that works. I mean, if people can write 1,000 new love songs every year and still come up with new angles, then that means that's fair game on basically anything, right?
Yeah. I remember years ago reading an article about the science of what pop music does to your mind and why it's so popular. And it's essentially was saying that pop music is pretty predictable. You know when a chorus is coming, you know when the beat's about to drop, and your mind actually is in love with things like that it can predict because the brain is such a pattern seeking organ. Even if you're not really a fan of pop, there's a kick that your brain gets out of understanding the format of something that you've never heard before
Yeah.
and being able to like, the chorus is coming up and then it happens and then your brain's like, that's good. I want more of that predictable stuff.
That's a cool, super awesome concept because I have always thought maybe I'm the only one that thinks that because I used to play different gigs with, kind of more simple, pop oriented mainstream music. And when I would do those gigs, did you practice? Did you practice? And I'm sitting here going like, not really, because if you listen to the song, like, I know what's about to happen.
Right.
And so I would always get a kick, like you said, like I'd play a song, and the first time I'm listening to it, about to learn it for, the gig that I'm going to do, I'm like, all right, here we go. Let me see if I can learn the part. And I'm like, I bet it's about to do this. And then it did that. And I'm like, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, and it's like,
but not knocking on it, but that is a cool concept you bring up, because I do get a kick out of going, I knew exactly what was going to happen. And it's awesome.
Most music is predicated on some degree of familiarity, and I think a lot of video game genres are too. Like if you drop in on a third person shooter or like an action RPG, you already know a little bit about how to navigate this world because you've done it before, right?
Right.
So the familiarity is good.
Yeah, like there are certain expectations that the world will put onto the thing that you make, and that's okay. Like, the joystick, left joystick is going to run forward, right joystick will move the camera. You know that in a third-person shooter, your right trigger on a controller is probably going to fire your gun.
Yep,
exactly. And that's just like the control scheme, But as far as like other things in the game, there are always there's always so much you can build off of, from the generations that came before.
Yeah, that familiarity really comes in handy for people, and so we knock it because we want truly unique ideas. And I'm like, no, but people benefit off of the ideas that are being built on a pre-existing concept.
Yeah, and going back to what Ray said about, finding that 16th thing, guys, what if you are the 16th thing?
Whoa. Mind blown.
I like how you're talking right now.
Because,
that's awesome.
Nobody that has ever lived has had a perspective as unique as the one that you have.
Oh, absolutely. I think
that is true.
Like your lived experiences are kind of the ingredients that make you you. And since you're carrying that unique recipe around, like no one can emulate that. So at the end of the day, you are the lens through which the rest of the world can kind of be colored. It's your perception.
God, this is sexy stuff, man.
What if get this? What if creating is actually us trying to give the world the recipe that we have to life, but it's so complex that's why we create, because we're trying to give it to everyone because it's our recipe.
It's like a cooking blog. You know how cooking blogs are terrible now?
Yeah.
It's like that.
And we just try different forms of medium to get it out because we're trying to tell people our recipe of life.
I wonder people are doing cooking podcasts now because blogs have fallen out of vogue. That's really random.
Are you referencing how you'll go on a recipe blog and instead of giving the recipe it'll be like, so 5 years ago I took a trip to Spain and I just kind of found myself, etc. I was like, all right.
I didn't actually learn a recipe from this.
Give me the food.
Give me the food. That is awesome. Guys, I love this discussion, and I think we've touched on a lot of really cool aspects, and especially David, having you on a medium that I personally don't have a lot of insight into, and I know Ray doesn't as well.
Nope.
So it's been cool to have Ray's aspect as a writer come together with you, David, as a graphic artist and video game creator. And I would love to just end in summation. What would you tell future, I know you touched on certain points in your discussion, but what would you ultimately, in summary, tell people who want to get into a long-term project or maybe are currently in one and are struggling with, is this worth continuing? What would you tell someone as both of you as an advice and a suggestion to those people that are currently in a long-term project?
And my answer to that has kind of changed a bit throughout the years, because at the time, whenever someone would ask, I was like, I don't know. I'm kind of looking for the answer myself. But now that I'm finished with a big daddy project, if you are in the middle of something right now and it's taken months or years of your life, keep going. Every small step you make is one step closer to that finish line, even if you don't know how far away that finish line is. If you've yet to start a project, all I can say is still get in there, just create something. The first thing that you make, if you've never made a video game or a cartoon or a book before, the first thing you make probably won't be your masterpiece. I made a lot of terrible things across the years that I don't show to anyone because those were steps that needed to be taken to learn what I'm good at, what I suck at, and where my passions lie. So just the best thing you can do for yourself is create and keep going.
Yeah, and for me, I would say the biggest tip would be kind of seeking consistent effort going forward, because you really have to recognize the difference between like a marathon pace and a sprint pace. For me, writing a song is like a sprint, and writing a story is like running a marathon, right? And so the most important thing is prepare. If you're going to take on a long-term project, be prepared to do consistent effort instead of big surges of effort. Like, you need to be touching this project probably every day, in a lower key volume compared to if you're doing something that if it's going to take a week, you knock it out, you're done. But if it's going to take a year, prepare to just give consistent effort instead of large surges of effort.
That's huge.
That's good. That's very good, because I know me personally. I think what's been a big fuel to me giving up on a long-term project would be that exhaustion that I felt, because I expelled a bunch of time into it at once, and then those longer breaks that you take of not touching it. That's where that fatigue, and I guess for me, I lost interest in it, or I just felt like I gave so much of it in that last segment and I only finished this much. Like, how am I going to finish it? You know what I mean? So that's a good point, Ray. That's a really good point.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, burnout is a real thing.
Oh,
yeah, it is. David, I want to say thank you so much for being on this podcast. This has been a neat conversation, and I would love to have you on in the future. Real quick, I would love for you to, any plugs that you have for any projects you're working on, just give the people some info on if they want to follow your work.
Yeah, sure thing. It's been super cool chatting with you guys again. I hate that I always go quiet for so long, but I just get crazy and like down in my projects, and I don't come up for air for a while. But
we get it, man. We get it.
As far as plugging anything, I would say go to skelettack.com, and you can learn all about Konami's Skelettack. It's on PC and every console. It came out in 2020, and I'm super duper proud of it. And every copy that gets sold it will help in some way, because it's not my baby anymore, but I really want it to do well for Konami in the long run, because I love those guys.
Yeah, man.
And they love me.
So that's our show. Feel free to reach out to us with any comments, questions, complaints, or future show ideas at our email, decodingthecreative@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at decodingthecreative, all one word. And we would like to give a special shout out to our logo design that was created by Dana Gray Studio, our intro music that was recorded by my co-host, Ray Hartsfield. And you can also check out my bands, The Road to Milestone and Avery, both on Spotify with albums out. Check them out, and we'll see you soon.